Elizabeth at A Literary Princess. If you are new here, welcome. I'm a 6-year PhD candidate in English literature with a focus on Victorian women novelists. And as you might expect, I love to read. Today, we are talking about my goals for 2025. And this is going to include discussing my new project for 2025, the 18th Century novel project, the 50 books that I want to read in 2025, and probably a few more things. So let's jump in. So for my Goodreads challenge, I am, as usual, setting the goal to 50 books. And I have picked out what I would like those 50 books to be. Am I going to read more than 50 books? Yes. Am I definitely going to read things that are not on this list of 50 books? Yes. Will I get to everything on the list of 50 books? Probably not, because I never do, but I'm gonna try. So, I have broken things into a spreadsheet, because of course I have, and I will share that with you now. Here is my beautiful spreadsheet in my 2025 Reading and Books data. I've got it all set up for the books I add in. My statistics are all ready to go, and then here is my little goals sheet. So, first off, I have 12 library books, which comes out to 1 library book per month. Those are not counted in the 50 books. Those are separate, but I do have them on here. Next up is my books for the 18th Century novel project. There are 12 of those. 12 works of Victorian literature. 5. I can't read. I don't have my glasses on. 5 other classics. 5 works of other fiction, so basically not classics, not fantasy. 5 fantasy, 5 nonfiction, 3 poetry, and 3 rereads. So everything from the 18th century novels onto the rereads will add up to 50. So we are now going to go through those 50 books in the categories that we just went through. And we will start with the 18th century novel books, and I will talk a little bit about the project and why I wanted to do the project. I obviously do 19th century literature, and it's very adjacent to 18th century. And a lot of the late 18th century books kind of bleed over into 19th century studies. But I really have not read a lot from the early 18th century. And I feel like that is something that I should be able to do, especially if I want to continue being in academia and teach. I feel like I should have more knowledge of the 18th century. So I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's read a bunch of 18th century novels in 2025. Now, the original plan was to read 10 18th century novels, 1 for every decade. However, some decades are just better than others. And there were a lot that I wanted to read from the 1790s, and not a single one that I wanted to read from between 1700 and 1709. And there were a few other, I think the 30s were kind of rough. So I was like, okay, we're just gonna do 12 books. We'll do them in publication order, so going from the earliest one to the latest one, but less focus on the decades. So in January, we will be starting off with Robinson Crusoe, published in 1719. This is by Daniel Defoe, and this is one that I'm like, I really need to read this because it gets referenced constantly in 18th century literature, and it's not even that long. So I'm like, I don't know how I got away with not reading this for as long as I have, but it's time to remedy that. I am not going to go into summaries of all of these because we'd be here forever. So, January, starting right off. For February, also from 1719, is Love in Excess by Eliza Haywood. I wanted to try to get as much of a balance of male and female authors as I could. So and a lot of the earlier famous works are by men. So I was like, okay, I need to find some early 18th century ladies, and Eliza Haywood is one. So very excited to get to this. In March, I will be doing Gulliver's Travels from 1726. This is another one that I'm like, I don't really know how I got away with not reading this, because it's super famous. Okay. For April, we have Pamela by Samuel Richardson from 1740. Now, I debated putting Clarissa on here instead of Pamela, but Clarissa it's not even a brick, it's multiple bricks. And I was like, no, I don't think we're about that this year, not this year. And I also already owned Pamela, so. For May, we have Tom Jones by Henry Fielding from 1849. I think the proper title is like The History of Tom Jones, and this one is a chunker. Oh my god. Too bad that didn't fall in March for March of the Mammoths, but you know, oh well. For June, we have The Female Quixote by Charlotte Lennox from 1852. I actually do own a copy of this. I lent it to a friend who I'm hopefully getting it back from tonight if she has finished it, but I wanted to film this today, so. In July, we have The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith from 1766. Nice and short to make up for, first of all, Tom Jones, and then the next one. In August, my birthday month, we have The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman by Lawrence Sterne from 1767. Chunky, chunky, chunky. In September, we have Maria, or The Wrongs of Women by Mary Wollstonecraft. I will also probably be reading the other two books in this, Mary by Wollstonecraft and Matilda by Mary Shelley, just because obviously they're super short and I have them, so I might as well. But the one for the project will be Maria. And that is from 1788. And I don't know the dates on Mary. And Matilda is actually 19th century. In October, we will have A Simple Story by Elizabeth Inchbald, published in 1791. My friend is writing a dissertation chapter on this, so I kind of know a fair amount about this already just from her conference papers and reading her stuff. But I'm excited to read it because it sounded kind of crazy. In November, we will have The Italian by Anne Radcliffe from 1796. This will be my second Radcliffe novel. I read The Mysteries of Udolpho and thought it was good but too long, so this one's quite a bit shorter and I've heard really good things about it. And then finally in December, we will have Camilla by Frances Burney, also from 1796. And it's giant, it's humongous, but you know, I loved Cecilia so much, so I'm really hoping to enjoy Camilla a lot as well. So that is everything for the 18th century novel project. Let's move into the 12 Victorian novels I want to read. Or I shouldn't even say novels, because there is a play in here. So first up is by one of my dissertation authors, and this is The Rich Husband by Charlotte Riddle. This has characters who are women writers, and I want to look at that for a potential other project in academia. I also, if I continue in academia, that's a whole thing, but we'll talk about that when the time comes. I also did want to read one book by each of my dissertation authors for this year, so you will see one book for each of them. I didn't make it its own separate category though, because I'll be finishing in May, so it's like not as urgent, I guess. Next up is actually a carryover from 2024 that I didn't get to. This is Mistress and Maid by Dinah Mullett-Crake. I just did not have time, but I do want to get to it. Another dissertation author, this is Vixen by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, which also features a woman writer character. I was reading about this in a critical biography of her and wanted to get to it. And by dissertation author number 3, my favorite, Margaret Oliphant, I have The Ladies Lindors, which I had hoped to read in 2024, but I substituted it out for a different Oliphant book. Now we finally get to a few that I have physical copies of. First off is Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens. I have heard such amazing things about this from Katie at Books and Things, and I was sad to not get to participate at all in the Mega Dickens read-along, and I haven't read Dickens in quite a while, except The Cricket on the Hearth, which I finished yesterday, but like that's so short, it like barely counts. But so I decided, you know what? This one, this chunkster, will either be for March of the Mammoths or for Victober. We'll see what happens. And one that I am definitely planning to read for Victober, and this is going to be An Ideal Husband by Oscar Wilde, which I have in a bind up of The Importance of Being Earnest and other plays. So I have read 3 of these five, I was right. Why do I doubt myself? I've read 3 of these 5 plays, and I want to read the other 2, so An Ideal Husband is one of the 2 that I have left, and I want to get to that in Victober, because I had so much fun with A Woman of No Importance this past Victober. Next up, we have Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell. I heard amazing things about this from Miriam at Miriam Elizabeth Reads, and I've had it for about a year now, I guess. Over a year and a half. And I was like, okay, it's time to get to it. And I haven't read a Gaskell book in a really long time either, so it's time. Now we have my boy Thomas Hardy with The Return of the Native. I am so excited to get to this one. I know I've talked about this in a few recent videos, so I won't say anymore, but very excited. We then have The Vicar of Rex Hill by Frances Milton Trollope. So this is one that I am picking up for my reading a book from each Victorian year project. This is for the first year, 1837, and will potentially be a buddy read with Katie from Books and Things. I don't know. We said maybe. We'll see what happens. I was gonna read The Widow Barnaby before reading this because I own a copy, but my copy has no page numbers, and it makes me, I'm not even gonna say irrationally angry, because I think that's a very rational thing to be angry about, but so I'm like, I can get The Vicar of Rex Hill on Kindle and not have to deal with it. So that's what I'm doing. Next up is another carryover from 2024. This is The Heir of Redcliffe by Charlotte Mary Young. I ended up getting to The Daisy Chain, but not The Heir of Redcliffe, so I want to get to this one in 2025. And another carryover from the past like 2 years by a dissertation author. This is Princess Napraxine by Ouida. I will get to it someday, and hopefully 2025 will be that day. And finishing out the Victorians, we have The Warden by Anthony Trollope. Nice and short. I have read Barchester Towers and not The Warden, which is the first book in the series, so I think that I should do that and then reread Barchester Towers and then continue with the series, because that seems like a normal person thing to do instead of just reading series completely out of order like I have been doing. All right, now we move into the other classics category, and this is basically everything that is not Victorian or 18th century. So first up, we have The Woman of Color, excuse me, author anonymous. We don't know who wrote it. This is a Regency book published in... Really? You're not going to tell me on the back? You're not going to tell me on the back. Okay, that's fine. I'm either going to read this for Feb Regency or Jane Austen July. We will see what happens. Next up, I need to stop neglecting my American classics. So I'm going to be reading Stoner by John Williams, which comes highly recommended by Alana Estelle. And then the book that I want to get to for Shake-Tember, or the play that I want to get to for Shake-Tember, I guess. This is Anthony and Cleopatra by William Shakespeare. This is the last of the Shakespeare plays I have seen performed but not read. So after that, I will have read everything that I have seen performed. And then I wanted to read some more Virginia Woolf. So we have To the Lighthouse, which I'm very excited for. I learned to love Virginia Woolf very recently with Mrs. Dalloway, which I had read and hated earlier. So I'm excited to continue on with Woolf. And then finally, we have a book in French because I hope to read 2 books in French in 2025, which is the same goal I had for 2024. I have read 1 so far. I'm hoping to start the second one soon. So I've only put one book in French on the list just because of the way listy things worked out, and you know, it's a list of 50, so I have to cut some things down. But this is De Côte de Chez Swann by Marcel Proust, Swann's Way, the first book in Search of Lost Time. And when I hauled this very recently, and when I did, I said, oh, it's gonna be really hard, so I won't get to it for probably a really long time. I've decided, no, we're just gonna try it. Now, I think I will read it toward the end of 2025, and I will do my other French book toward the beginning, because I am getting, hopefully for Christmas, and if not for Christmas, then I'll buy them myself, some other books in that same edition that I have of Charles Perrault's Fairy Tales, which is meant for English speakers learning French, and has a bunch of notes and stuff. So, like, do the easier one first, easier because it has notes, and then do the really hard one with no notes later in the year, and we'll see what happens. If I don't get to it, it's not the end of the world. I just want to try. Moving into other fiction, which means it's not a classic and it's not fantasy. It's mostly historical fiction, to be honest. First up, we have Elmet by Fiona Mosley. I've had this book for ages, and I think I bought it because there was an article about it in the Bronte Parsonage Museum newsletter, and I was like, ooh. And it does sound interesting, not that I actually remember what it is about. It's set in Yorkshire. But I'm like, okay, read the book. Girl, how long have you had this? Read the damn book. Another one that I've had for ages. This is The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. This I've heard so many good things about. It is so pretty. And I actually did start it, but on audiobook, and then was not in the mood for an audiobook, it turned out. But I do want to get to this. One that is not historical fiction. This is a mystery. And this is The Secret Place by Tana French. This is one of her Dublin Murder Squad books. I have read 2 of them, In the Woods and The Likeness. This is not the next one in the series, but you don't actually have to read them in order, and I haven't read them in order because I started with The Likeness, which is technically book 2. This is just the one that sounded the most interesting to me, so I was like, okay, that's the one I'm gonna buy, and then, you know, I didn't read it, and now I'm gonna read it. Back to the historical fiction, we have Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. I have heard amazing things about this from literally everybody, so it's time. And the final other fiction book is Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyeyemi. I really enjoy Oyeyemi. I have read 3 other books by her, and I've had this one for a while and just haven't picked it up. She plays around a lot with fairy tales, and this one plays with Snow White. So I'm sure it will be weird because hers are always super weird and the writing will be complicated but beautiful. And that's what I expect from her. Moving into fantasy. First up, we have The Fate of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. This is the 3rd book in the Tearling trilogy, which I started years ago and never finished. I will be rereading the first 2. We'll talk about that in the reread section, but I'm very excited to finish this series because I liked it a lot. Next up is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Also heard amazing things about this, and I loved Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So good, one of my absolute favorite books ever, so I have high hopes for this. We then have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is dark academia, but a fantasy dark academia taking place at Yale. I've heard good things. I've also heard some mixed things, so we'll see what happens. We have a book that I do not have yet, but that I'm pretty sure I'm going to get for Christmas, and this is A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. This was just released this year in 2024, and it is a retelling of The Goose Girl, and I'm so excited for it. I love T. Kingfisher, and I love The Goose Girl, so. And then, finishing the fantasy category, we have A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. So this is continuing on the Court of Thorns and Roses series. Now, I read that series in like 2016 to 2017, I guess, and really enjoyed it, but I was quite a bit younger then. So I did buy this when it came out and then never got to it. And now I'm like, am I even gonna enjoy this? I don't know. But I want to read it, and if I don't like it, then get it off my shelves because it is a chunkster and takes up a lot of space. I bought it at my favorite bookstore too, and I have a bookmark there to prove it. So yeah, I want to get to this one, and hopefully I like it, and if I don't, I will know I've just grown out of that series. Next up, we are moving into the nonfiction. And first up is for Jane Austen July. This is Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley. I've heard amazing things about it. I've had it for quite a while and need to get to it. Next up is one of two nonfiction books that I am reading as kind of part of the 18th Century Novel Project. And this is The Social Life of Books, Reading Together in the 18th Century Home by Abigail Williams. I'm planning to read this for Feb Regency, even though it technically covers quite a bit longer than the Regency period, since it's doing the whole 18th century, and the Regency only covers like the tail end of the 18th century. But I need to read this early in the year because I have access to it through my university library, which I will not be able to access after I graduate in May. So I need to, read everything as quick as I can. Now another one that is on my Christmas list, and this is the Unabridged Journals of Sylvia Plath. So I think any of you who've been watching for a while may know that I have gone into my second Plath era, because my first Plath era was definitely in high school. But yeah, I read Red Comet by Heather Clark, a biography of Sylvia Plath, and then I'm just obsessed now. So I want to read her journals, and I'm pretty sure that's what I'm going to be getting for Christmas. And now for the other book for the 18th Century Novel Project. This is Romantic Outlaws, The Extraordinary Lives of Mary Wollstonecraft and her daughter Mary Shelley. So obviously Mary Wollstonecraft was mostly 18th century, Mary Shelley was 19th century, but I feel like this is a good one since I am reading Mary Wollstonecraft's Maria and probably also Mary Shelley's Matilda, just because it's in the bind-up. I've wanted to read this for a while and I've heard so many amazing things. And then finally, we have just a really fun nonfiction. This is Welcome to the OC, the Oral History, Alan Sepinwall in conversation with Josh Schwartz, Stephanie Savage, and the cast and crew. The OC is my favorite teen drama, even though it was not coming out when I was a teenager. I was a little too young for it. I watched it in college, but I love this show so much. And when I saw this in Target, I needed it, so I bought it. I am hoping to try to get my husband to watch at least a few episodes of the OC with me soon. So I thought it would be fun if we're gonna rewatch the whole show, which maybe, to read this. I'm so excited. And then we move into the poetry category, and I'll give you one guess on who's up first. This is the Collected Poems of Sylvia Plath. I just bought this recently as part of my Plath revival era. So yeah, I mean, obviously. I actually started reading it this year in a library copy before I bought it, but I don't know why, I was just kind of burnt out from poetry at that point and didn't want to. But then I saw this in the store, and so I bought it, and I really want to read it. Although I'm a little bit irritated because it's the collected poems, but it's not the complete poems, because A Mad Girl's Love Song is not in here. And I'm like, Ted Hughes, what the F? Because he's the one that edited it. That was her husband. Whatever, I'm excited. We then have Sappho, translated by Mary Barnard. I just bought this recently. I mean, Sappho is obviously very short because it's fragments. I have read a little bit of Sappho for my world literature survey in undergrad, but that's really it. And I do want to expand my ancient Greek literature. I've really only read the Iliad and parts of the Odyssey. Oh, and Oedipus Rex and Antigone. And Medea by Euripides. Okay, I've read a fair amount, but not nearly enough. And then the final book in the poetry is the complete poems of Emily Dickinson. So this is one of the books that is on my 40 classics to read before 40 list. And I actually didn't intend to read it in 2025. However, Emily Dickinson was my grandmother's favorite poet. She passed away in October, and I ended up reading Because I Could Not Stop for Death at the service we had for her, and I was like, you know what? I think I want to read all of these in 2025. We're almost there. We are on our last category, the reread category. Now, I never used to include rereads on this list, but I did it starting last year because I wanted to include what I was going to read for Jane Austen July, which was Pride and Prejudice, which is a reread because most things by Jane Austen are a reread for me. So I decided to include a reread section. And first up is The Queen of the Tierling by Erica Johansson, the first book in that series, the Tierling trilogy. It's been so long, I remember basics, but not details, so I do need to reread it. And then we've got The Invasion of the Tierling, the second book, also by Erica Johansson. Again, I can remember some things, just not enough to jump right into the third book. And then we are ending on my main book for Jane Austen July, and that is going to be Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I don't know when the last time I read Northanger was. It might have been during my master's program, which that would have been the first term and would have been in 2015. So that's going to have been 10 years ago. Ew. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the last time I read it, so I would definitely like to reread it. And I watched the TV movie with my husband in July for Jane Austen July this year, and it was just so nice to revisit that story, and I want to revisit it on the page. So, those are my 2025 goals. My new 18th century novel project, my 50 books I want to read, my little spreadsheet, everything. So, let me know down in the comments below, have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? What are your reading plans for 2025? If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more of my bookish content. It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.